And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show on SportsNetUSA.net. Corey Neyland here, along with Mark Pavlovich, Ed Ford on the ones and twos, and our special guest tonight, Clayton B. Payne. It's a beautiful thing to have this gentleman on with us. So I'll turn it over to Mark to get us going and tell you just why that is.
Well, I'm really fortunate to know the young man that is in the lower left-hand box for many years. I was there and lucky enough to be there when he was born. I watched him grow. I remember when he had shoulder-length hair. I can take you through a majority of stages with that young man sitting in front of you. He's a young man with a master's degree. He's a young man that's a vice principal. He is an accomplished musician that he has done that. He is also an audio technician, so Ed Ford probably feels very comfortable with having Clayton up right now. And, I guess he's surfer. He's a runner. He's a great dad, a great husband. And the most important thing is that's my nephew, Clayton Bennett Payne. And Clayton, just to let you know, I have your counterpart down in the living room right here at my studio, Dr. James R. Payne, that I think he was oblivious that you were coming on the air with me. So far, so good. He hasn't peeked around the corner. So,
Well, I appreciate you not opening up with some of the more embarrassing stories that I'm sure as the evening progresses we may delve into. I just want to correct very briefly. I am fortunate enough to not be a vice principal. That is a position that requires a lot more tact and a lot more intelligence than I possess. I am the currently the Dean of Student Support at the Grauer School down here in Encinitas.
Well, this is a sports station. We talk about sports, we talk about education, we talk about everything. So where do we want to begin first? So I think we want to begin first with Dean of Student Support. It, explain the Grauer School and its philosophy and its environment. We'll start there.
I'd be happy to start there. This actually marks my 19th year as a member of the faculty there. The Grauer School is actually celebrating its 30th anniversary. It was founded by Dr. Stuart Grauer, who is still our head of school, still going strong. And he is also the founder and leader in the Small Schools Coalition. It's really a global effort to sort of downsize middle school, high school, elementary schools to populations of under 250, 200 students, to really bring the idea of relationship-driven education back to the forefront. We're lucky enough to have a student body that ranges between 150 to 160 on a given day. We are nestled in some really beautiful coastal habitat in Encinitas. A large portion of our property is actually reserved as wildlife refuge to never be developed. And that's a constant reminder of one of our very important goals is to awaken in our students a sense of activism, that this world that they're growing up in is theirs to make of it what they want and to shape it the way they want to see the future. And it has been a very fun ride these 18 years going into year 19, and what a year 19 it's started out to be.
so Corey, I'm going to flip it for just a second because you tell us where you are today. You tell us you're at Grauer. But let's walk backwards. Let's walk backwards for the old guy. You grew up
Okay.
in the San Diego area. So give us a little history of Clayton Bennett Payne. I mean, I know how crazy your mother is because unfortunately, no, not really. I'm related to her. So, and Corey knows how crazy she is because he's met the greatest female football coach of all time. And of course, we know your dad, who
Mm-hmm.
is, well, he's a PhD, and you know how I feel about them. So, where where do you come from? I mean, San Diego, and how do you even go from the background I know that you're going to tell us to the world of education? So let's start off and work our way forward with Clayton Bennett Payne.
All right. I think one of the most important places to start is probably in the sixth grade, because so much of it begins right there where, like most sixth grade boys, when your friends have a good idea, you think it's a good idea too. So all my neighborhood friends thought that joining the school band was a really good idea. And I proudly came home that day and announced my intention that I was going to join the school concert band and learn to play the trumpet. And my dad looked at me and said, "No, you're going to play the drums," which is probably the opposite experience that most musicians have. Usually it's their parents saying, "No, don't play the drums. We want you to play a serious instrument." Um, and I was terrible. I wasn't really into it that first year. I think I probably skipped out on a concert that we were supposed to do in elementary school. Really didn't have the discipline. And my dad took me to a concert that the local high school I would eventually go to, put on. And the high school actually had the Marine Corps concert band from Camp Pendleton come play. And they were in their dress blues. And they did the 1812 overture, and they slayed it. Like, you guys know, like, basketball arenas, even high school ones, they're built for two things: for basketball and for drums to sound good. And so when those guys in their dress blues were just crushing it, I had no intention of pursuing music after elementary school. But when I saw that, I was like, no, 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 no. I want to do that. And so I continued with band into junior high. Um, and it was there that I met a gentleman who is a year older than I am, who's now a local legend, San Diego drummer, San Diego Music Award winner for both his hip hop group, Parker Meridian, and for his jazz work, a gentleman named Nathan Hubbard. But at the time, he was this skinny heavy metal dude. And he got all of us into heavy metal. And there's something about heavy metal that it's the most welcoming global music community there is. And when you're feeling like an awkward kid, and by awkward, like, I had a mullet. It eventually became all long, but at that time I had a mullet, felt awkward, and metal was this safe place. And so between heavy metal and concert band, the drums hooked me. And then into high school, I was in the marching band. I had the distinction of being the last drum major of San Diego High School before they canceled the music program. And in through high school and for the last 20 plus years, I have been playing as a drummer professionally. I went to UCSD and studied cultural anthropology. And but how does one become a teacher? I was telling this story actually earlier today, that in high school I had three teachers in particular that were huge influences on me. My English teacher, Mr. Cunningham, my math teacher, Mr. Williams, and my marine biology teacher, Mr. Maxon. And one of those just serendipitous funny things is Mr. Cunningham, who was a really big influence on my thinking, and he was also the cross country coach of San Diego High School.
There you
And
go.
years later, that for some bizarre reason, in my adult life, I decided to put on running shoes and decide to go running. Because up until that moment, if you had asked me if I ran, I would say only if chased by a bear. So it's really bizarre that I became a cross country runner and coach later in my adult life.
And so in high school, you mentioned being a drum major. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that is something that I wanted to ask you ever since Mark told me. Were you a drum major in the mold of Florida A&M drum majors, Southern drum majors, or was it a little bit more, I don't know, structured when you were a drum major? Because I've known you for a while now, and I can
All
see
right.
you down at Florida A&M getting down a little bit.
Um, I think it was drum major more along the lines of having joined the Rebel Alliance in Star Wars, to be honest. Um, because some of the schools in Southern California, marching band
Mhm.
was not the thing to do. And for the really serious musicians, they were in private orchestras doing very serious music. Um, so we were basically bribing some of our friends to join marching band to keep our program alive. The gentleman I mentioned earlier, Nathan Hubbard, I mean, he was the drum major before me. He was fighting tooth and nail, recruiting musicians to be in the marching band. Um, because it wasn't something that was done. It didn't have the relationship with sports in our district that it did even in some of our neighboring districts. So during my time as drum major, I tried to do a few things that had pizzazz, like when we would do the Star Spangled Banner before the football games. At the hold of the very last note, I would jump off the ladder and sail through the air and land on the ground. And when I hit the ground is when the band was supposed to stop. Um, I thought that was a very cool kind of Pete Townsend thing to do. Wreaked havoc
Okay.
on my knees. It's amazing that I became a runner after all those jumps
Yeah.
in dress shoes. But um, no, it was a dark time for music.
Clayton, you brought up the fact that, and Corey brings up you're a drum major, and then you sort of slip it in there that there was not this relationship with sports and at least your marching band at your school, because Corey brings up, when he brings up the schools he said you'd be a drum major at, Corey, they're an integral part of their athletic department. So what was it at your school that made you a separate entity, and were you guys just decoration on the sporting field, or you were there because you were supposed to be?
I think we were there because we were supposed to be. We did our level best. Uh, just the funding wasn't there, the interest wasn't there. I think our overall district demographics didn't lend themselves. Like our football team at the time didn't do so hot, and so it was a little bit, I think, of kind of habit. Like you had Friday night football games, you had the marching band go with it. Um, some of our neighboring schools in different districts, I mean, they had giant marching bands. When we'd go do these marching band competitions, you know, schools like Rancho Buena Vista or Oceanside High School, they had giant bands that were like the real deal, complete with color guard and dance team and the drum lines.
Wow.
Those guys, they were sick. They knew every trick, and there was us doing our level best to avoid extinction.
So all
What
three
were
of
you go
you,
to? What?
all three, I was just going to ask Corey. So, in other words, all three of you, the clarinet player, the drummer, and the one trumpeter you had, didn't win any of the band competitions?
Uh, we actually in our division. We did take home a few trophies. We were very proud of ourselves, particularly the drum line. I remember we brought home a couple trophies. Um, Partially because by this point, Nathan, not when I was a senior, when I was a junior, Nathan had sort of left heavy metal and gotten way into jazz, really like bebop, post bop stuff, and also was reading books by Mickey Hart. And so, as a drumline, he inspired us to look at anything as a potential percussion instrument. We kind of were notorious for finding things like ashtrays, parts of cars, school bells, you name it, and seeing what we could do with it. Nathan's father ran a very large construction company, and he would give us free reign to go into the yard, and they had a contract with the city, so we discovered that Nathan discovered, really, and we were all along for the ride, that the reflective lenses from the inside of street lamps, when hit with a soft mallet, makes this gorgeous bell tone. And brake drums from cars are just awesome. Springs and all that kind of stuff. So I think our innovation that way, I think impressed a few judges where they're just like, what are they even playing on? This is fun. Later on in college, when I took some history of music courses, I learned that we were doing stuff that serious composers like Varese and Anheil were doing, early part of the 20th century. But of course, we were idiots and we had no idea. We just thought we were kind of cool and punk rock about it.
And so, what were some of the go-to songs in high school for those performances?
Um, 1 o'clock jump. I remember.
Okay.
That was a big dance. That was for our drill team. That was their performance piece. We also got to do Sing, 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 which was super awesome. I got to do the Gene Krupa part, but on timpanis, because I was in the pit that year.
Wow.
Which was really a lot of fun. Some other just kind of classic marching band songs, and then some reaches, like we did School's Out by Alice Cooper. And that proved to be really challenging for our marching band because technically the song is in like a swung feel. And so to like a rocker, we hear it as in 4, but swung 4. To someone arranging for marching band, they hear it in 3. And it proved
Explain
challenging.
that, because explain that to me. Explain what you just said, because I have no idea what 4
Okay.
and a 3 is.
So most Western music is built on even divisions, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, which when it comes to marching is really easy because left, right, left, right, left, right. And the origins of that really in the American music sort of zeitgeist come from New Orleans. New Orleans being sort of the one place in Southern America where musical expression was allowed amongst both the free and enslaved African American population of the United States. Many people ask, like, well, why doesn't North America, have the rich percussion that Southern American music like Brazil and Argentina have? And it's because it was outlawed. But in New Orleans, musical expression, Congo Square, was allowed, and that kind of 4 feel that came with the African diaspora and was sort of marching music for funerals, for celebrations in New Orleans, that eventually became jazz music, really sort of has embedded itself. So we, as Americans, we naturally count things as like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, left, right, left, right. Whereas you get other senses of time, which is like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But with anything where you're written in 3, you're going to alternate, which foot is hitting on 1. Because it's going to be right, left, right, and then you're starting a new measure, and you're starting on your left foot. And that proved problematic for some of our young musicians.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Corey, I have a technical difficulty. You know those people. You know
Oh,
those
yeah,
people that have You know those people that have PhDs that drive me nuts.
I'm going to blame your sister.
What?
She says, well, turn the TV down while I'm talking to her. So I go to push some buttons on your TV, and I can't get it to come back the way it was.
You know, Corey, there's a Corey Neyland moment.
He's laughing.
I'm stepping away. Ed Ford, I got to step away. I got a technical thing for the PhD, so I'll be right back. You two talk. You two talk.
That's your dad. Okay. So
Yeah.
since they're gone, out of high school, you went to college, and
Yep.
in college, did you belong to, let's say, the college band in college, or did you start to form your own sound, your own with your friends and stuff?
Um, I had been playing in various rock groups with friends since high school, and so that really just continued. I did take some music classes at UCSD that like, blew my mind. A history of serious music in the 20th century. One that I am so grateful for professionally now is I took a music class that was music and mathematics. And this professor went on to show all this trigonometry that I had enjoyed learning about in high school,
Hmm.
related to this thing I liked doing with other people, like hitting things with sticks and strumming strings, and how the math and the trig all supported music.
Right.
And then from there, it was this beautiful light bulb moment where like, wait, these worlds overlap.
Okay.
Um,
And so when they overlap, is that when you really found when you said your light bulb? Is that when it took off for you, that you knew you can be great at this? Because I've seen you play. So did you know that time that you were going to be very significant in your musical skills?
oh no, I think I'm terrible. That's very kind of you to compliment you. I'm gonna let you in on a secret. Drummers, we are the most insecure bunch of musicians. We're all convinced that we're awful, and we're totally freaked out about the guy next to us being better. Some of us are just way better at hiding it than others. Um, I just enjoyed it. It was just so much fun, and I've met the most interesting people through playing music, and people have become lifelong friends. And even as we don't play music together, we're still very close in our lives. And playing music was just, I couldn't not play music.
Okay.
It wasn't a sense of feeling confident in it. It's just, I had to.
And so you had to. So that moves us, and I'm getting to the sports stuff. So the background is good.
Okay.
Well,
One more question mark before we get to the sports
yeah,
stuff. Okay.
because
The Go ahead.
oh, I thought you. Oh, okay, because I want to ask Clayton because it works with drumming. Yeah, that's right, Clayton. I'm back. Some of us know how to do things. You talk about the drumming, and you talk about the rhythm that you've taught Corey and everything else. You are also the math teacher at Grauer. So I want to know if what you've explained to Corey from the aspect of music and rhythm and beats and numbers, do you use any of this when you teach math at Grauer? Do any of your students sit there and go, Mr. Payne, Mr. Payne, I don't get this. Do you sit there and go, let me show you?
Oh, my poor students. Yeah, when we hit trigonometry and pre-calculus,
Mhm.
oh, I'm off at the races. I explain like why, I'll use a ukulele or a keyboard to explain like why major chords and minor chords mathematically sound different from each other. Um, Also, too, trigonometry plays a really important part in surfing, and so in addition to music related lessons and folding the music into the math lesson and giving uh, an example of like, oh, this is how trig is applied. This is how early synthesizer technology was developed. This is why early synthesizers sounded a certain way, and they had to figure out all this other trig to make them sound much more like realistic instruments. But like I said, I also fold the surfing. Like when there's a day second semester where we have a trig lab where I take my students to the nearby surf break, picking donuts up along the way, of course, because you can't go beach in Cardiff without going to VG's for donuts. And I sit them down, I sit in the sand and said, okay, you guys need to write for me the equation of the wave that we're watching these surfers on. And I have this whole rubric set up, and I just let them know. I said, roughly when you're looking at the front of a wave, you're seeing roughly 2/3 of the total distance from the peak to the trough of the energy form. And we can assume that those surfers are 6 feet tall. So figure it out. And they work together as a group, and they struggle with it. And then there's one part where it says, okay, someone used their smartphone to look at what the tide is right at this moment. And then they have to figure out, like, well, okay, well, what is the tide in terms of, the part of the equation? And then at the end, we compare what they've crunched with the results that Surfline puts out online. And in all the years that I've been doing this lab, my students have been spot on. So feeling pretty good about that in terms of applying that knowledge. Like, this is how people are using this information on a daily basis. This is how the surfers, whether they know the trig or not, are relying on this math to have a good day.
Well, that's math. That's one of the things we're going to get into. So before we get into that, though, like we said, we saw you perform, and it was a very good performance. I really enjoyed it. How do you go
Thank you.
from heavy metal to band to where you're at now, and explain the type of music and the musical philosophy of the Liquorsmiths?
So the short answer is I still play heavy metal drums. I'm just playing heavy metal drums with an incredibly talented singer-songwriter with an acoustic guitar who has a bit of punk rock ferocity to him. And our keyboard player, who is also an incredibly talented drummer, he's playing jazz keyboard and jazz drums at the same time. And so part of the idea of the Liquorsmiths is this: just be you, be your authentic self. And let's see what happens when we put, these elements together. And, I can play a beat, and if I just play it softer, or with brushes or some other odd stick combination, I feel like I'm pulling a fast one on Drew, our singer-songwriter, because he won't know that I'm basically playing a heavy metal beat. Ryan will know as a drummer, and he'll give me a look like, I know what you're pulling off. It's okay. And so he's my silent co-conspirator in the back. But now, so if Drew watches this, he's going to know now, and he's going to be like, no, okay, no more of that. No. Our philosophy, like I said, is just to be our most authentic selves. And part of what makes it work is we don't rehearse, or we very rarely rehearse. So sometimes when you see us play, we're playing that song together for the first time. I believe when you came out and saw us, I had asked Drew to learn My Way, the Sinatra tune, from my grandfather who had just passed, because I knew Mark was going to be there. And Drew came up with a version. He handed on just like a yellow piece of paper the chords to Ryan, and that was the first time we played it when you guys saw it. Like, none of us knew how we were going to play that song, and that happened. And we probably won't ever play it that way, exactly that way again. I mean, some of our own songs we don't play the same way every time, so that's the exciting element of it.
So you take a I know this sounds horrible, but you take a haphazard involvement as band members and
Mm-hmm.
perform well. So as an instructor, as a coach, where does the mindset for Clayton go from haphazard artist to disciplined educator, disciplined athlete? Because to me, you're an athlete as a drummer, but there's got
So,
to be a weird mindset that you turn off the artistic side and you go to the educational side with the athletic side on the bald spot on the top of your head.
well, you're just assuming that I'm disciplined in both coaching and teaching. That's on you. No, being
No,
haphazard is
your dad's
exciting.
on me. That's a different show.
Sometime when we're yeah, that's a totally different show. I'll explain to you what it was like providing tech support for Disney Plus over the phone once. Um,
Okay.
no. Part of what makes teaching at the Grauer School so rewarding is like philosophically, like we believe that given enough time and care, anybody can learn anything. And while we adhere to the state standards, while you look at our college admission record, it's remarkable. You see what our students do in their lives after education, and you're thrilled. We do this by really trying to instill a love of learning and showing that learning, whatever it is fun. So, as a math teacher, I love teaching math because I think it's super neat how all these pieces fit together to explain things. Like to me, it doesn't make music any less beautiful when I can write out a chord chart as a trigonometric equation. Um, there's this professor of mathematics who wrote this famous paper about the opening chord to the Beatles' A Hard Day's Night, that nobody, no cover band, nobody could get it right. And he was a musician and a mathematician. He painstakingly went to recreate the conditions of the opening chord to that song. And it still didn't sound right. Like he had replica instruments, microphones, you name it. And then he painstakingly mathematically deconstructed the recording and discovered a sound wave in there that, based on the shape of the wave and the construction of it, was somebody really, really low in the room played a chord that is not in the key of the song. All the notes are in the key of the song, but that particular chord was not in the key of the song, and it created dissonance. And that's why no one has been able to make that chord correctly, because somebody with some music theory knowledge was like, oh, I'm going to play this, and it roughed up the sound waves. And so to be able to look and just be like, wow, that's why that chord works? That's incredible. Or the fact that, like, why does Dimebag Darrell's guitar in Pantera sound weirder than other people's guitar? Is because they pan the guitar hard left, hard right, and flip one of those channels 180 degrees out of phase, which mathematically means that as one sound wave is going up, the exact same mirrored wave is going down. So if you listen to that guitar track in mono, the guitar track cancels itself out, it goes away. But in stereo, your brain picks up on that difference just enough to tell you that something is not right. I mean, that's all part of the mystery of life, and that's just like so fascinating. So that danger and sort of just enthusiasm for discovery is inherent in my teaching. And when it comes to coaching, oh man, I am a terrible coach. Like in the league we compete in, there's this other coach, and he is all business, and he has all the drills, and he has a large team, and they come out and they're doing the drills, and like my team's throwing a frisbee around, and then afterwards they're like, oh, can we go like hit 7-Eleven? Will you buy us Slurpees again? I'm like, oh heck yeah, let's go. Because the athletes that I'm getting usually in cross country as a coach, the ones who are good they don't need me to coach them. They need me to maybe provide a pointer and something. But what I want to do, because this is what I discovered when I discovered running, is I want to give them the keys to freedom. Because in my life, like what running has become is it's this meditative spiritual thing. I can lace up and hit it and I'm free. And like I tell the students, like as an adolescent, I would not be an adolescent now for all the tea in China, because, you know, like when we were kids, if kids were talking about us behind our back, we got to go home and it was done. It was like, okay, that just exists in the school year. Now with the digital world, these poor students are on guard all the time from what is happening on their social media, what the news feeds that they're getting. Now, like with real-time grade reporting, now as a school, like we've stepped back real-time grade reporting. We've recognized how detrimental to a student's health it can be, and they're just under pressure all the time. And so, as a coach, I'm not trying to create a winning team. Now, one year, I had a winning boys team, and we crushed the other guy, and it felt so good. Don't get me wrong, that was an awesome year. But what I'm trying to give my runners is this sense, like, you know what, in our culture, exercise is like the one excuse you can give somebody for not being reachable. Like, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you take my call? If you say like, oh, I was exercising, I was out running, most people back off instantly. And I wanted to instill just a love of that freedom, just to be like, I'm not fast, but to lace up and go do 3 miles through a trail system, you know, get distracted because there's a hawk overhead, because I got to make sure it's not, you know, like a vulture thinking I'm about to pass out and it's going to come and eat me, you know, startling a roadrunner. That's amazing. That is so free, and that is so just like at this like really spiritual root of being a human being. And so it's almost a lack of discipline. Like, I want to give young athletes like an excuse to be undisciplined, to be free.
And I know Mark is going to build upon that, but I want to go back to the students that you do coach, and you said the freedom to be that,
Mm-hmm.
the undisciplined is to be free. Does the
Mm-hmm.
programs that you have, the no-cut athletic programs at the school, does that help in that situation?
Oh, absolutely. It really does. Our athletic director, Trevor Olson, has worked really hard with Dr. Grauer to have an inclusive athletic program. Now, we also do have a CIF partnership with a neighboring school. So for those students who, as high school level athletes, really want to go for that competitive edge, we have that through basketball, tennis, our girls volleyball team. I mean, they're awesome. They're super awesome. In fact, one of my runners went and did run for the other school in CIF and did really well. I was so proud of him. And but at the middle school level, it really just like, it's get out there, try it, see if you like it. And if it speaks to you, then, you know, the coach will be there who will push you to greatness.
And Corey, you're right. I was going to follow up on Clayton's statement of being undisciplined, because Clayton, when you say that to me and you talk about the artistic side that may have that undisciplined feel, and then you look
Mm-hmm.
at the athlete for the undisciplined feel, everything's got a goal. So I find that sense of freedom, but there has to be that sense of discipline to achieve your goal. Even if it's that I'm a runner and I run just for peace of mind, just
Mm-hmm.
for my own soul, like Jim Thorpe did. Jim Thorpe ran to clear his mind. But at the same time, as a coach, there's got to be that kid that goes, like Corey Neyland, I ran a quarter of a mile. I'm done. I mean, as a coach, there's that discipline that's got to convince Corey Neyland, hey, if you run a half a mile, you might discover something that you never thought you discovered. So where is that fine line for you as a coach?
Part of it is I selfishly run with my team. And so it's modeling that behavior and being honest and talking with them about like, no, I didn't start running until the 2000s. I don't know why I started running. And being honest in terms of like when I started running for a peace of mind, it was really particularly like, oh, if I was really frustrated, I'd go out and I could like, oh, I'm mad and, really run. But now I've hit this point where like I can't run angry. I have to tell
Explain that.
well, like for me, like running is just taking this really personal, very spiritual element to me, and so I may be anxious and decide to go running, but I do my stretches and I calm my mind down, and then I start going, and within the first quarter mile, it whatever had got me to that point that I felt like, oh, I have to go run right now is gone, and I found like if I'm trying to run angry, that's where injury happens. That's when you're not listening to your body and you push yourself in a way that could damage a lifelong love of something. So to answer the question about that student, that to me, like, we're a relationship-based school. Last June, we had a young man graduate who tried to be on my cross-country team as a middle schooler, and we had done this one race on a very flat course, and he was nowhere to be found. And he had just given up at some point on the course. And because I expressed, I'm like, well, what did you get hurt? Ran through the checklist, and he's just like, no, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I just didn't want to do it. And I was just like, okay. And then when he was graduating, and he has become this incredibly accomplished musician, and we talked about, like, do you remember when, and as following his academic career, there are lots of points along the way where he had that same mindset in different things, coming across like he just couldn't bring himself to do it, and just being really honest with him and said, at some point, you've got to figure that out. I can't answer that for you. You've got to figure out how to make yourself do it. You don't have to. You never have to. You can walk away, and that's totally fine. But if you want to go that next step, that is a problem you have to solve. You could talk to me about it. You could work through the way you're going to solve it. And as I'm surrounded by innumerable professionals who are willing to have that conversation with students on a daily basis. I mean, at the Grauer School, I am so lucky with the people that I work with who care so much for the students. And we all have stories like this where our students will talk through these things, but then that final moment, it's them finding it, that discipline, and then that taking them to the next step. Because outside discipline is just inauthentic.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Mark. Now, when you talk about this type of coaching, this type of teaching, why is there a reason why we don't see this type of coaching in sports more at the forefront?
I would argue that it is it's hard. It is really hard because as a coach, you're going to get, or as a teacher, you're going to get your feelings hurt. You have to wear your heart on your sleeve. Um, and I think there are some organizations that do have coaching like this. Um, I, and and certainly it's, you get the coach that's it's the Hollywood trope, right? It starts off at the hard
Mm-hmm.
edge, and then the coach softens, and there's this meeting ground between the coach and the player. And I don't think that would be a Hollywood trope if it wasn't something that coaches were doing every day in locker rooms across any number of different sports. It just looks different, and and I think certain sports lend itself probably better to it than others, just because of the cultural expectation of it.
So we know the joy that you got from music because in you discussing it tonight, Corey and I can watch you light up. This could be a 5-hour program, and Corey and I'd sit back there and just listen to you the entire time. What was the joy, or what is the same joy, or what joy was it that you would compare to joy in music that you've discovered that same joy in coaching? Is it the camaraderie? Is it because you won that one championship? Or it's what?
Ooh. Um, that is a challenging question. I think part of it is the camaraderie, certainly. And in both my approach to running with students and teaching students in class, their students are amazing. Little human beings. Some are taller than I am, so I shouldn't say that. And they are so eager to discover. And it's that act of discovery that is it's so thrilling to be a part of that with somebody. When it's the kid who signed up for cross country because they heard that after practice I buy the kids Slurpees, and then I misjudged the distance we're going to run, and we ran 3 miles on the first day, and they look at me and they were like, we were going to do 2, and I'm like, yeah, sorry, I wasn't wearing a GPS. And they're like, wow. And they have this the look like, I can run 3 miles. Mm-hmm. I just did that. Similarly to mathematics, right? It's like, yeah, you started the semester in pre-calculus, and you're just like, I think this was a bad idea. I shouldn't be in this math class. And then at the end, they're sitting with a B or an A or even a C, and they're just going, I can't believe that I did that. Like, I learned this stuff. And that's a fun energy to be a part of it. Like being in the Liquorsmiths, when we do stuff and it works, and we look at each other on stage and we're like, oh, okay, that was cool. That worked. And it's that joy of finding where your limit is and taking just that one step beyond it into the undiscovered country of the self. And that's just so exciting. It's an exciting place to be on a daily basis. And it's palpable in our environment that's happening in every classroom. So.
And I'm going to let Mark take the next question, but don't forget, you are watching the show on sportsnetusa.net. I'm Corey. Hello. Mark is up there with the mustache. Clayton down there, our guest, is down there with the beard. And we're talking sports, we're talking math, we're talking music. Mark, I'll let you ask this next question because I got one for you. Because we also going to talk a little bit of pop culture, a little marvelous stuff, so to speak. So, Mark, what you got on this next one?
Oh, wow.
Well, I just thought it was interesting that he quoted you, Corey Neyland, in his last statement, because Corey more than once has said, I don't think I should be in this math class. So I thought that was pretty interesting that you stole one of his
That's
quotes.
that's why it only took me 10 years to get through. Oh, 7. I'm sorry, I can't add.
Well,
Clayton,
what's the saying that you meet the sport at the coach? And you should just have
Yeah,
that attitude in every aspect. As a teacher, they're meeting the subject at you, and you've got to love it, but you've got to love them too. And if I enjoy running recreationally, and I try and show that, and um, music. I mean, there's nothing worse than watching a musician who doesn't want to be there on stage. Because as a musician, I just think about how many other musicians would gladly take their spot.
right.
you know,
Yeah, we saw that
and
last week in the bubble.
yeah, we did.
Sorry,
I'm
Mark.
gonna I'm gonna stick with your running just for a second though, Clayton, because everybody heard
Mhm.
you're a coach and everything else, but you are a dedicated runner too. I mean, you run with your son Thatcher on the
Mm-hmm.
turkey trot every year. So give me a little thing with Clayton Bennett Payne gets ready to run, either strictly for pleasure, he's trying to get rid of the world on his shoulder. What is an average run for you? How many miles do you normally run? And what is the toughest run you've ever had, being as a competitive runner or that weekend runner that chose to bid off more than he should have?
The toughest run I think I ever had was one of the Surfing Madonna beach runs down here in Encinitas, which is in the Guinness Book of World Record for longest beach run, or no, most attended beach run. Sorry, and I was running the 10K, and I've had this reoccurring problem with my soleus in my leg. And about a mile into the 10K, I pulled it, and it was excruciating pain. Running on sand is tough, and depending on the tides in the day, sometimes you're running across cobblestone on that. It can be really treacherous. And I had been training for it and just running a lot, and I felt really good. And I had in my head that I was gonna PR that race, and pulled my muscle in the first mile. And I was so just down and disappointed. And I fought for the remaining 5 miles. I finished the race. Like an idiot, I stretched it, kept running, would stop, stretch it, go. See, this is why I'm a bad coach. It's because I don't stop when I'm injured. But that was a really valuable lesson because I wasn't being true to myself as a runner. Like I run because I enjoy it, not to chase a clock. So I thought that was a hard lesson to learn when my body failed me. Typically, I like 3 miles is just like a beautiful, just like short little run to go do. Right here by my house, I can go out and I know the exact mile and a half turnaround point. And it's hilly. And in terms of training, on the way back, there's this long, low hill that is in the last half mile on the way back. And that's always a challenge. But I really enjoy 6 to 8 miles, especially like if I'm along the coast.
What's the difference?
Runners were the coast
What
versus the street.
between 3 miles and then the 6 to 8 miles? Explain that to us non-runners. Well, explain that to me, the non-runner. What the difference
Okay,
is?
so for me, like 3 miles, I could do 3 miles. I can do it quick for me and not be in the zone. Like really, just like aware, you know, to wear my other hat as the religion studies teacher, to not be part of the flow, to not really acknowledge like and be aware of my body in a way like for me, getting 6 to 8, you become aware of how each joint feels, how your hips feel, at least for me. I mean, you get other runners who regularly crush marathons and they'll tell you that, 6 miles, he went out and did a sprint. But that for me is like when I really become aware, like where's my breathing at? Where am I feeling pain? Why am I feeling pain? Okay, can I take the time to correct something in my gait? Was it, okay, I got to watch how I step off that curb next time. So that for me is the difference, and in a very sort of Eastern philosophical sense, it's at that longer thing again, because I'm a terrible coach. My stretching regimen is awful. The regularity with which I run. So doing 6 to 8 is unless I'm really training for a half marathon, 6 to 8 is kind of near the edge of my envelope. So, I'm keenly aware of what I physically can do when I'm at that length.
Clayton, Clayton, that works for Corey too, because 6 to 8 donuts is right at his point of stretching and the envelope. So, I'm going to get out of the way.
No. If I'm going 6 to 8 donuts, I'm going for the full dozen. Okay, I don't do things halfway. I'm going for the full dozen. And I'm glad you answered that last part, Clayton, because now I don't have to ask the next question about the spirituality aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, like I when I explain to people what I teach, that I teach math, I teach religion, and I coach, they're like, wow, that's so different. My running joke is that it's not different. I'm looking at the same thing from just different points of view. The world is this miraculous place. There's things of beauty everywhere around us, and if you look at it from a poetic side and use the language of poetry, I feel that's where a lot of religion comes from. It comes from the figurative language and explaining the awe one feels as part of this environment. Mathematics is using an agreed upon language of numbers to explain phenomenon as well. Not to take the beauty away from it, but in the old school Muslim approach, that science is an act of devotion, because if you believe in a monotheistic God, to use science to explain down to quarks as parts of atoms and how these things work, all that does is just really showing off the magnificence of that divine creator that you believe in. The fact that it is so meticulously put together just reinforces, if you were a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew, the glory to the creator who did that. So I don't see those worlds as being very separate. And in the running, you're stripping yourself down to your core essence as a human being and interacting with your environment and opening yourself up to the experience of the environment in a very sort of vulnerable way that puts you in touch with that same sort of perspective.
So in saying that, Clayton, I mean, really the worlds that you live in as a musician, mm-hmm. as a coach, as an instructor, with what you're explaining to me, why I'm really sitting here, is you play in the worlds of the individual, not in the world of the group. Am I misconceiving that? Because everything you do, I look at drummers as being loners. They set a rhythm for the rest of the world to play around. You set the rhythm for the music to make the complete picture, have a reason behind it. You as a runner, or as a coach as a runner, you do it as an individual, that individual soul, that individual world, that accomplishment, but you encompass the rest of the world to be able to obtain it. As an educator, you take your thought, your mind, the way you look at things, and you relate it to maybe, if you're lucky, one other individual to take your thought and move it on to one other person as an individual progressive. So are you that, is what you do if you combine all three, saying you're that lone wolf and that's why all three work together?
No, actually, it's quite the opposite. Like, none of that works in a vacuum. Um, One of the most difficult aspects of being a drummer in the quarantine times of COVID-19 is I like playing in front of an audience. I like playing with other musicians. Like, practicing my rudiments in a garage is not fun to me. Running, even though, I mean, the pre-masks, well, when you're out running, there is, when you're passing that other runner and you smile at each other, there's a community there. And being a teacher, one of the humbling aspects that you have to make peace with as a teacher is you are actually disposable in your students' lives. They are going to go off and live these rich lives that are totally their own, and you are just this like small part of it. And so you can't get caught up in your ego or your individuality in your relationship with that, that you are part of a greater fabric of things. Like, as a drummer, you're part of a greater fabric and a greater language and a greater community of music, and you are progressing that language. As a teacher, you're doing the same thing in all these other different lives. And as as a runner, especially like the big races, like when you're out in a half marathon or a marathon, it's like you're all out there together. When you pass the guy who's got the sign on his back that says, "I just beat cancer," and you're coming up the hill behind him and you're going to pass him because you're going faster, you still like slow down for a second, turn to him, and you're just like, yeah, man, that's incredible. And then you connect with that, like you're all connecting. And so it's really the opposite. Like, doing all these things makes you less of an individual and really brings your attention to being part of a greater community.
Well,
Man, we should have just ended it there.
Yeah, but I'm gonna let Corey ask you something, because talk about the greater community that I'm not a part of.
Uh-oh.
Just for a little,
I'm worried
fun. My partner, Mr. Neyland's got a question for you, or more than one, and I'm just gonna sit back and listen because I have no idea what you're talking about.
So we've got a couple. Speaking of that marvelous world,
Oh,
the world of Marvel. So you're a
so
hockey
this
guy.
is, I am a hockey guy.
All right.
That
And
is
you're a
true.
Marvel
So
guy.
you are behaving like one of my students who knows that, like, I don't want to do this lesson today, so I'm going to bring up something Marvel, and I know that's going to chew up at least 5 minutes of Clayton's class.
Welcome to the sports class as well. But usually it's Mark who throws everything off. Um, so you watch a lot of hockey. You think Mark told me you think the best player in the world ever was Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky in the world of Marvel, who would be the Wayne Gretzky of a Marvel character?
Ooh.
I can go a little bit less. I'll let you work up to that. How about
Okay, that's a tough one.
okay? Now, if you had a hockey player as the and I thought I was onto something before I actually looked this up last night online when I've seen 10 different other people do this. Um, as Spider-Man, who's maybe my favorite character, who is the
All right.
Spider-Man of hockey?
Who is the Spider-Man of hockey? Um, right now, I've got to go. It's Quinn Hughes with the Canucks. That
Okay.
guy, this like spunky young defenseman. He's incredible, and he just like swings into places where he's supposed to be, and he would be the Spider-Man right now.
And go ahead.
I was gonna say, to go back to the Gretzky. Um, I think from a comic book standpoint, I think Captain America would be Gretzky, and not for any like greatness of power or anything else, but in terms of the way many writers treat that character and give him this gravity of the responsibility and the gratitude for all the other different players in it, and the care he shows for the other heroes, and the reverence he shows for the act of being a superhero. So you read some of Gretzky's books, this is a guy, he's a phenomenal player, racked up more points than anybody, but he loves the game, and he looks back on other players with just like idol worship reverence in the way he writes about them. And so I think there's a genuine authenticity to him, and that's why I would choose Captain America.
Okay, and one more for my Czech brethren and sisters, my brothers and sisters. Jaromír Jágr is the Marvel character. Yeah, is the Marvel character who?
The answer is a little long, but I'm going to go Jágr is Wolverine. And the reason Jágr is Wolverine is I recently heard this podcast that was talking about the history of the actual term mullet. And the actual term mullet did not appear in print until the mid-90s, in a Beastie Boys song of all places. And so they were trying to track down where this term came from. And because of hockey players like Jágr, who had the short in front, long in back, that like classic 80s to 90s hockey flow, there is a term, and I don't remember which language, but the term for what we call a mullet literally translates in English to hockey hair. And so that's why I'm going Wolverine with Jágr, just because he set the bar for flow, I think.
All right. Well, Mark, that's all I got. I'll let you, if you have one more question, you want to close it out. I have been enlightened more in this conversation that we've had this last hour than I don't know when. I'm actually gonna get up in the morning tomorrow and think about running, but I'll probably just walk to the dollar store.
Well, Corey, what frightened me the most is both of us sat here and said, thank goodness we don't have to go to a junior high class tomorrow, because we'd be saying, excuse me, Mr. Payne, can I have that hall pass that Corey just had and be walking in there? Clayton, I don't just say this because you're my nephew, but you are one of the more refreshing educators that Corey and I have had the pleasure to meet. I love the fact that you love everything you do. I wish most educators did. I'm glad that you embrace sports, music, education, and the world. And Corey, like we've said, if everybody took everything and enjoyed everything that they could do, it'd be a better place out there. Grauer School's got a heck of an instructor down there, and I know that your school is a heck of a place for young people to attend. Thanks for being on the program tonight with us.
Thank you guys for having me. This was a blast. It was a true pleasure to get to share on behalf of many of my colleagues what makes Grauer the unique place that it is. One of the things about sports is you learn that it's about the team. If you have one hotshot player, but the rest of your team can't support it, your team's not going anywhere. And I'm so lucky to be part of a really fantastic team, to be just to use a hockey analogy, to be the veteran defender who can eat up minutes. And so thank you guys for letting me eat up some minutes with you on this evening.
So for Clayton Bennett Payne, Corey Neyland, Ed Ford, I am the Buddha of Babel. You've been watching the show on SportsNet USA.net.